Hello everybody, my name is Gary Sims from Android Authority. Now there are many reasons to want to write an Android app. Maybe you've got a great idea and you want to prototype it on Android. Maybe you know about PC programming and you want to move over to mobile. Maybe it's part of a college or university course. Whatever the reason is, writing Android apps can be fun and rewarding. And today I'm going to show you how to write your first Android app. Okay, before we begin, we need to mention a couple of things. First of all, you really need to know a little bit about the Java programming language to get you through this particular tutorial. Now, I've already done a video on Java basics. You can find that video on the Android Authority YouTube channel. You can also find the accompanying article on the Android Authority website. I do recommend that you go and read that. Now, when I made that tutorial, some people left in their comments that they thought I was going too fast through the material. So for this video, I'm going to say two things. First of all, I'm going to repeat certain elements a couple of times just to make sure that you've got them when they're particularly important. And secondly, please do use the pause button and go back and watch things again if you didn't quite get it on the first time round. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so to write an app, you're going to need to download and install Android Studio, and that's provided by Google. And if you can't find it, you'll find the link to it in the written companion to this video on the Android Authority website. Now, included in the download is the software development kit for Android. That's all the bits and pieces you need to develop an app, as well as the Android emulator, so that you can initially test your app on a PC without needing to install it on a real device. However, before you install Android Studio, you're going to need to install the Java Development Kit from Oracle. Go over to the written companion and you'll find the links to tell you where to download the JDK. Now, you need to make sure you download the right version, either 32-bit or 64-bit. Check which version of Windows you're running and download the right one, because if you don't, you're going to have trouble running Android Studio. Install that and then you can install Android Studio. During the install, you'll need to configure how much memory to reserve for the Android emulator. Now, the emulator runs Android in a kind of virtual machine as an Android phone with an Intel processor. This is faster than emulating an ARM processor on your PC. However, to do this, the virtual machine needs to allocate some memory. The installation program will recommend how much memory to reserve, and it's probably best to accept the default. However, be aware that the combination of Android Studio, Java and the emulator all running together can be quite memory hungry, and your PC will slow to a crawl unless you have lots of RAM. Google says you need 2 GB of RAM as a minimum and that 4 GB of RAM is recommended. However, my main PC has 8 GB of RAM and sometimes it still struggles. When you first run Android Studio, it will perform some initialization, including downloading and installing the latest Android SDK. This can take several minutes, so you will need to be a bit patient. When it finally does all start up, you'll be presented with a nice menu that allows you to start a new project, open an existing project, import a project, and so on. And as you might expect, you need to click on Start a New Android Studio Project. You will then need to enter in a name for your app in the application name field. I would suggest something like My First App. And in the company domain field, you need to enter the domain name of your company. If you are an independent developer or a hobbyist, enter your own domain name. If you're just experimenting with Android and won't be publishing your apps to Google Play anytime soon, then just leave the domain as it is. Maybe you could just change the word user to your own name. On the next dialog, make sure that the phone and tablet is selected and that the minimum SDK is set to API 15 Android 4.0.3. Make sure that Wear and TV are not ticked. On the Add an Activity to Mobile dialog, use the default blank activity and then click Next again. On the Customize the Activity dialog, just use the default values and click Finish. The Integrated Development Environment IDE will now start. This can take several minutes, especially if it's the first time you've created a project. When the IDE appears, if you see the error message rendering problems, rendering failed with a known bug, then just click the rebuild link as indicated next to the error. The default workspace for the IDE is split into 3 parts, excluding the toolbars. On the upper left is the project tree, to its right is the code editor and designer, and beneath them both is where you'll see the various messages from the compiler and so on. At this point, you can actually compile and run the auto-generated code. However, it's not very interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a few things, not very much, but just enough to give you a taste of Android app development. The project tree holds the different files and resources that you need to build your Android app. Under the app node in the project tree, you will see several other nodes like folders, subfolders, which you can expand. The top level nodes are manifests, Java and res stands for resources. Under manifests, you'll find the file Android manifest.xml. Every application must have one of these files. It's an XML file with information about the app, including its name. One of the most common things that you'll add to this file is the list of permissions needed by your app. For this simple test, we won't need to change anything here. Under the Java folder, you'll find the Java code for your app. In fact, you'll find it under a subfolder called something like com.example.user.myFirstApp, or whatever is the domain name that you entered earlier on when we started the project. Under that folder, you'll find a file called mainActivity.java. This is the entry point for your app, and for our example app, this is the only Java file we're going to need, but we are going to need to add some Java into this file. So just again, so you got that, under the Java folder, you're going to find a subfolder with the domain name of your company with the app name appended to it. And under that, you're going to find mainActivity.java. And that's the main entry point for this very simple app. Under the resources folder, the res folder, you're going to find lots of other subfolders. Now this is where the different resources for the project are kept. That means graphics, string values, menus, and most importantly, where the definition for the user interface is stored. Now, the two that are of interest to us for this example app are layout and values. Under layout, you'll find a file called activity_main.xml. It is an XML file that describes the user interface. There are two ways to edit this file. The first is to edit the XML code directly, and the second is to use the built-in UI designer. So under res layout, you'll find a file called activity_main.xml, and this is the file that describes the user interface for your Android app. Now, once you become proficient and an expert at Android app development, you may find yourself often editing the XML file directly. But thankfully, Android Studio has a built-in UI designer, and as you change elements on the UI using the designer, it automatically creates the corresponding XML file, and that's what we're going to do in our sample app in a few moments. The values folder contains several different XML files, and the most important one for this example app is strings.xml. Rather than hard coding string values into the Java code, values are placed into strings.xml and then they are referenced using an ID. Now, the advantage of this system is that if a string needs to be changed in multiple places, all you have to do is change it once in strings.xml and it will be changed throughout all of the code. It also makes supporting multiple languages in the app that whole much easier. So just to repeat that, strings.xml is where the string values are stored, and in the Java code and in the XML file for the layout, you just reference the string using the ID, and we'll see about that in a few minutes. So just to sum up then, to create this sample app that we're going to do today, you need to modify mainActivity.java to add some Java code. We're going to need to modify activity_main.xml because we're going to change the UI. And we're going to need to modify strings.xml because we want to add some hard-coded strings like OK or tap me into that file. So let's start by altering the text of the label and changing its alignment. First, find the activity_main.xml file in the project tree and double click. Remember that activity main.xml is the file which holds the user interface definition. At the bottom of the code window, there are two tabs, design and text. Make sure you are using the design tab. Now click on the text hello world that is shown on the rendering of the phone. If it's too small, use the zoom buttons, the plus sign in the magnifying glass, to enlarge the rendering of the phone. In the property windows just to the right of the phone image, scroll down until you find Layout, Center in Parent. Click the space next to it and select Horizontal. The Hello World text will now jump to the horizontal center. Now to change the text. The string Hello World is held in that file we mentioned earlier, strings.xml, under Resources, Values. If you double click on the file, you will see a few lines of XML that define a few strings used by the app. Find the line that says string equal to hello world in angle brackets, then hello world, and then the closing string tab, and change the hello world exclamation point to tap me if you dare. Now to add the button. Back on the design tab of activity underbar main.xml, find and click on the button in the palette list on the left hand side of the phone rendering. Now click somewhere beneath the text tap me if you dare on the phone image. Make sure it's somewhere in the middle. Now double click on the button so that you can change the text. The quick and dirty way is just to change the text and leave it hard coded in the Java file. However, since we've already been used to using strings.xml, it's best that we carry on using it. At the end of the text field is a button with 3 dots. Click on it. In the resources window that appears, click on New Resource and then New String Value. In the resource name, enter tap me, and in the resource value, enter tap me exclamation point. Now click OK, and you'll notice that the button now says tap me. The final step is to add some Java code which reacts to the button being tapped. One of the UI elements of Android is called a toast. A toast provides simple feedback in a small pop-up that appears for a few moments and then disappears. You've definitely seen it when you've been using Android. For example, in Gmail, navigating away from an email before you send it triggers a message saved as a draft toast. Toasts appear automatically and then disappear after a predefined timeout. For our sample app, we will need to display a toast every time the button is tapped. The first step is to add some Java code. Find main activity.java and add the following code beneath onCreate. The word view, as in view V, will likely be in red with a message bubble displayed near it. This is Android Studio telling you that you have used a new construct, view, without importing it in the import section at the top of the Java code. This is actually very easy to fix. Click on the word view and press Alt-Enter. Android Studio will fix it for you. If the word toast is in red, then do exactly the same thing. Click on the word toast and then press Alt-Enter. Now back in the designer for activity underbar main.xml, click on the button and scroll down through the property list until you find on click. Click on the combo box to the right of it and it will see a list of functions. Click on button tap. That's the function we just added to the Java code. So now the on button tap function will be called whenever the button is tapped. When it is called, it creates a toast called myToast that will display the message ouch. To show the toast, we just call myToast.show. And that's it in terms of writing the app. Now it's time to test it in the emulator. Under the Tools menu, navigate to Android AVD Manager. This tool shows you the current list of configured Android virtual devices. You will have one device configured by default, probably a Nexus 5. Click on the play icon, the triangle, under the Actions column, and this will start the emulator. Now, depending on the performance of your PC and how much RAM you have, the emulator can take several minutes to start up. Once the emulator is up and running, go to Tools and click Run App. This will compile your app and send it to the emulator. During this process, Android Studio will ask you which emulator to use. You will see your emulator in the list. It should be the default option, so just click OK. The app will appear in the emulator eventually. You can now click the Tap Me button and watch for the toast to appear towards the bottom of the emulated device. Congratulations! It's actually possible to run your app on a real Android device, and the easiest way to do that is to enable USB debugging on your phone and connect it to your PC. The USB debugging option can be found under Settings Developers. If you don't have a Developers option in your Settings menu, then go to Settings About and tap the build number 7 times. With the device connected, click on Run App under the Tools menu, but this time don't send the app to a virtual device, send it to a real device. If your device isn't listed, it either means that you haven't enabled USB debugging or you need to install the appropriate USB development drivers for your device. Google has some documentation on this and you'll find links to it in the written companion. Well, obviously this is just the beginning, but you have today written yourself your first Android app with a little bit of user interaction. And what you should now do is write your second app and then your third app, keep adding to it, keep learning. Google has lots of training material, there's lots of documentation, there's lots of sample code, but the thing to remember is just keep having fun. Keep experimenting and keep having fun. You'll find it very rewarding. Now do keep coming back to AndroidAuthority.com because we're going to keep posting developer related content for you, new tutorials, new things in the future, so do keep tuning in. You should probably also sign up to the Android Authority weekly developer newsletter. You'll find that at devweekly.androidauthority.com. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our Android Authority YouTube channel. If you've got any questions, please use the comments below and we'll see if we can help you if you had any problems developing this first app. And as for me, I'll see you in my next video.